My name is Gary Jones. I am proud to be the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation of Western Connecticut. Thank you for attending your Federation's virtual Yom HaShoah program. We are truly honored that so many people from all parts of Western Connecticut are participating in this important observance. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about current manifestations of anti-Semitism and the Jewish community's ongoing need for vigilance in the face of these challenges. The attack on the U.S. Capitol building on January 6 was troubling in so many ways. After all, an attack and brief takeover of a building so meaningful to our representative democracy was a rude awakening for Americans and lovers of freedom throughout the world. However, from the Jewish lens, we also saw reminders of horrors of the past and new confirmation that hate and conspiracy theories targeting Jews never seemed to go away. Whether it was the Camp Auschwitz t-shirt, the copy of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, or the many hate symbols on display, we saw further evidence that where there are extremists and hateful people, Jews are always a target. Even though this attack had nothing to do with Jews directly, some of the rioters could not refrain from displaying their hatred for Jews. I would like to make two specific points in this discussion. First, although the Holocaust is a historical event, the efforts to demonize and dehumanize Jewish people that gave rise to the Holocaust continue to this day. Although the Capitol attack is emblematic of traditional right-wing forms of anti-Semitism, current manifestations of anti-Semitism are found on all sides of the political spectrum and in religious extremists of many stripes as well. It is our job to remind our leaders and others of the many and diverse kinds of anti-Semitism that threaten us today. The United States has unquestionably been the best country for Jews in the history of the diaspora. The blessings of religious liberty and the freedom to pursue one's dreams have resulted in unique opportunities for the Jewish community. However, freedom of religious expression and economic freedoms do not necessarily result in freedom from hate. Historically, in our country, there has always been anti-Semitism, and that hate has manifested itself in many ways. However, after the Holocaust, anti-Semitic expression was substantially reduced in our country. Jew hatred by no means disappeared. However, to put it in current terms, it was no longer politically correct to be a vocal hater of Jews. Although there are unfortunately exceptions to this rule, like Louis Farrakhan and his Nation of Islam, there aren't many people in our country who comfortably and publicly use traditional European-style hate speech directed at Jews. But here's the thing about anti-Semitism. It isn't static. It morphs into whatever fits the perceived problems of the day. Jews have been blamed for pandemics, for controlling the world, and have been accused of being communists and capitalists. Whatever is deemed to be evil to a particular society at a particular time, Jews have been scapegoated as the perpetrators of that evil. Obviously, the efforts to blame Jews for all sorts of problems have been irrational and at times even inconsistent. But that does not mean that these efforts haven't been successful in painting Jews as the cause of a society's troubles. And Jews have been victimized throughout our history as a result. Now, for the first time in nearly 2 millennia, the Jewish people have a homeland. So Israel, the Jewish state, has become a new subject of anti-Semitism. Israel has become a manifestation of the awful things that Jews do, so Israel has become a target. And in the last few decades, it has become identified, in some circles, with some of the major afflictions of the world: racism, apartheid, and colonialism, just to name a few. We know how unfair that is to Israel and how hurtful that is to us. That is noted with past manifestations of anti-Semitism. That doesn't mean it doesn't have an effect. Consider the ramifications of this hatred of Israel. It is the only country that many other nations believe simply has no right to exist in any shape or form. Although Israel, like any other nation, is fair game for criticism of its policies or the actions of its government, the problem that many nations have with Israel is not what Israel does, but rather that it is. The crime is that Israel continues to exist. Further, how many other countries are threatened with annihilation? Iran and other nation states and terrorist entities regularly threaten to destroy Israel. When the only Jewish state in the world is the only state whose right to exist is regularly called into question and threatened with destruction, that obviously is anti-Semitism. The twin threats of delegitimization and extermination are not only consequential to Israel, but to Jews everywhere. If Israel becomes unsafe, all Jews everywhere are at risk. The drumbeat of hate targeting Israel around the world is also impacting the Jewish community in the United States. There are many sophisticated and well-funded organizations in our country whose sole mission is to portray Israel as a racist, oppressive state which simply shouldn't be permitted to exist. We all know if these organizations become stronger and reach larger audiences, there is a chance that the U.S. will not continue to support Israel. Having the United States as a strong and committed ally is a fundamental component of maintaining the safety and security of Israel. In addition, too many progressive groups in our country are falling prey to the effort of these Israel-hating groups to portray Israel as the bad guy, making it uncomfortable for some progressive Jews to show support for Israel. Although these efforts are being undertaken in a variety of contexts, I'll briefly explain how this effort to eliminate support for Israel works on some college campuses, as many trends, both good and bad, are incubated in our universities. College students are prime targets of these single-issue Israel-hating organizations. Because of the success of the anti-Israel groups in convincing progressive groups that fighting Israel is what progressive people do, progressive organizations on some college campuses are actively working to isolate and humiliate Jews who dare to support Israel. As wrong as they may be, the progressive groups who are influenced by the anti-Israel groups are entitled to their opinion. However, the effort to punish and harass Jews and others who support Israel is both wrong and discriminatory. Just as these groups are entitled to hate Israel, Jews and others are equally entitled to love Israel. Yet, too often, this discriminatory punishment of Jews for their support of Israel goes unchecked in some college environments. As a Jewish community, we have to support students who are brave enough to stand up for Israel in difficult circumstances, and to encourage others to do so as well. But we also need to educate campus administrators, our elected officials, and others that love for Israel is a fundamental part of being Jewish. Again, that does not mean we have to support every policy or decision of its government. However, we need to do a better job of helping people to understand that Judaism is not simply a religion. Jews are a people, and we are a people with historic and current ties to a specific land, and that land is Israel. To require someone to give up that relationship in order to be accepted as a progressive, or anything else for that matter, is simply discriminatory. The point is that we as a Jewish community need to protect our students on campus and elsewhere, not only from swastikas and harassment associated with more traditional forms of anti-Semitism, but from Israel-related anti-Semitism as well. The problems we continue to experience are real and growing. Anti-Semitism is never stagnant. It is never one size fits all. It continually changes to reflect whatever is deemed to be bad by the perpetrators of the hate. As a result, we have to be vigilant and we have to be brave in the face of the ongoing threats to the Jewish people and Israel. We have to be advocates who reach out to our fellow Jews, our government, and to our friends and neighbors to help them understand our concerns. Your federation is taking on a leading role in looking out for our community by informing you of events and concerns affecting the Jewish future. Educating and advocating regarding new and old threats is never easy, and in some senses, even more difficult than it has been. But we owe it to ourselves, to our children, and to the Jewish future. And we especially owe it to our cherished Holocaust survivors and their succeeding generations, and to the victims of the Holocaust, to make sure that the Jewish people live and continue to be strong and safe. Thank you for listening.